a couple of folks from the Youth Guidance Organization to talk tonight also. So first of all, for those who don't know me, I'm Scott Myers. Been a long-term member of the church and have been a long-time member of Youth Guidance, serving on the board. And tonight, this is another in our series around racial justice. And the theme really for tonight is, as you can see, spirit of repair. And one of the things that, as we talked as a committee, that we wanted to try and do was was to move our conversation from some of the history, some of the challenges, some of the books that have been talked about, into some actions that have taken. And Youth Guidance is an organization that the church as an institution has supported for a considerable period of time. And it's also something that members of the church have been part of. So Dick Patterson, who's on tonight, myself, John Raitt, Susan Bondurant, are all deeply involved with the organization. And so we'll talk a little bit about it from our personal point of view, but also tonight we have Dacaris Wilson from Youth Guidance, and also Michelle Cruz, both who've been very involved with the various programs. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about using Youth Guidance as an example of how we as individuals and as an institution can begin to deal with some of the challenges that have come out of maybe perhaps the lack of racial justice over the last many years. So let me just kind of quickly cover a few slides here. I'm going to try and figure out why this is not, there we go. A few quick facts. For those of you who have been going on the racial justice website, you've probably seen these facts popping up over time. And one of the things that we have tried to do on the website is provide some context for the history of why, how have we arrived at the point where we're at. So I pulled just 5 different facts here, which kind of run a span of time, right? So going back all the way to the 1860s, you look at one of the major drivers of wealth creation in the United States, many people don't know, was the Homestead Act, which granted free land to anybody. All you had to do was farm the land for 5 years and you owned it. And the interesting thing is, of that huge wealth generation, there were 0.3% of the total number of people who received land were Blacks. If you look at moving up to the 1920s, in terms of some of the rules on sales of homes in the United States, there were rules that actually prohibited the sale of homes to African Americans. And we had a presentation where we talked about even redlining on the North Shore, in Evanston and in Glencoe, and restrictions on how Blacks were allowed to move into these communities. And the impact that has is, when you look at income equality in the US and wealth equality in the US, those 2 factors in and of themselves have meant that today, while Blacks might have 60% income equality, their wealth equality is significantly less. And that's because a lot of wealth in the United States is generated from home ownership, and wealth that is then passed down generation to generation, oftentimes through home ownership. We talked about, through a presentation that George Wishart created or arranged, around the challenges around bail levels for Blacks and whites, and that how bail oftentimes is a challenge for Black defendants, and they're forced through jail time to plead guilty just to get out of jail. And then also, we've seen, obviously, in recent history, not only the challenges of lethal engagement between Blacks and white police officers, which is Blacks are 3 times more likely to be have a lethal encounter with police than whites, but also in terms of even non-lethal engagement, Blacks have 50% greater experience in terms of non-lethal force that's used than interactions with police than whites. So, I mean, the challenge that has meant, and this now begins to lead us into Youth Guidance, is that within poor or under-resourced communities of color, you have higher levels of depression and anxiety. You have higher levels of trauma, social and emotional trauma. Obviously, much higher levels of single parent families. The dropout rate in high school is greater, as well as the incarceration rate. So we've got this challenge in our society. And one of the things that youth guidance has done is really focused on how do we engage with youth between kind of the junior high and high school ages, and how do we provide them with the support that will enable them to deal with so many of the psychological and social and emotional challenges they have. I mean, one of the things that we as and I'm going to say we, meaning youth guidance, we as an organization have seen through some of the research done on the Becoming a Man program is that 70% of the violence, the serious violent incidences in Chicago are really not, they're not premeditated altercations. They are emotional. They are spur of the moment. They are situations where youth just simply make a snap reaction. There's a very sad example of a number of youth who were quarreling over a bicycle and who would get to ride the bicycle. And one of the kids pulled out a gun and shot another kid. There was no premeditation there. There was no issue in terms of, he was going to get away with the crime. It was just simply acting out. It was an impulsive issue. We see that also with kids making decisions around dropping out of school. They're struggling. They aren't getting along with a teacher. They feel ostracized and they decide to drop out. So this issue around giving youth the tools to deal with the stresses that they live with every day in their neighborhoods is something that DK and Michelle will talk more about, but it's one of the key areas of focus that youth guidance tries to address. And one of the things in the youth guidance programs, we're serving over 7,000 kids in Chicago. The Becoming a Man and WOW programs have proven to be so successful in their impact that we now are expanding the programs across the U.S. The Becoming a Man program is now in Boston, Seattle, Los Angeles, and Kansas City, as well as London, England. And the WOW program is kind of following along that same path. And the whole focus is that cities around this country are seeing that youth need to have support in dealing with the stress. And when you think about your own lives, right, our own lives, we all as kids face some kind of stress. And for the vast majority of us, we had parents there, we had teachers there, it might have been a scout leader, we had mentors in our lives that helped us to learn constructive ways to deal with that stress. And one of the things that youth guidance is through the BAM and WOW programs is really trying to do is provide a support for these youth to learn the tools in terms of how to deal with their stress. Just a couple more slides here in terms of the impact that the BAM and WOW programs have. You can see in terms of some of the types of students that we're dealing with, many of them have very high levels of depression and anxiety. And the BAM program, one of the things we've seen is 50% reduction in arrests for violent crime. It's not on the slide here, but it's about a 30% reduction in arrests for other types of crimes, higher graduation rates, and the same thing with the WOW program, where significant decreases in kind of the trauma and the post-traumatic stress syndrome that many of the young women who live in these communities feel. So it's a program that has demonstrated its impact in really helping these students to try and learn how to tackle the challenges they face. So with that, that quick overview, I'm going to turn it over to DK and Michelle. So DK is one of the regional supervisors for the Youth Guidance Becoming a Man program. He was a counselor in one of the schools. He'll talk a little bit about that. He now kind of manages a number of our programs across the city in different schools. And Michelle was a WOW counselor, and she is now in charge of the kind of the Michelle, I'm forgetting the word.
Oh, so weird. It's called the Alumni Initiative.
Alumni, thank you.
So I work with the alumni of all of Youth Guidance.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to them. I'm going to stop sharing so you can see their faces. And then I'm going to let them go ahead. So DK, if you want to take it away from here, and we'll have a chance for questions and answers afterwards.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for giving in this space and creating this space. I can feel it's a tight space. You all know each other. Y'all are praying for each other. It is a good space to be in when you feel welcome. And so I definitely feel welcome. Again, my name is Dacaris Wilson. I am originally from West Helena, Arkansas. I've lived in Chicago for about 7 years. As Scott spoke about, I was a counselor for the Becoming a Man program for 5 years at Morgan Park High School. And then recently I was promoted, thank God for promotions, to regional manager for the Far South. And to kind of go over in a little bit more deeper detail about what BAM and how transformative the program has been. Again, I came to Chicago with my own set of ideas and stereotypes about what I heard from the news. And my grandparents, my grandfather was a C-SPAN and CNN person. So it was news all around the house. And so when I made the decision to move here, he was just like, boy, you're going to need to get a gun. You're going to need to do this. And, all the stuff going on from what we had saw, from the news. And when I got here, I knew that there would be differences, but it was actually not what people made it out to be. I remember going into Morgan Park for the first time, and I had one thing about me, I love Starbucks. I had a cup of Starbucks and I had on a cardigan. And this kid comes up to me and said, why do you have on an open sweater? And I was just like, I never thought about it like that, but I guess it is an open sweater. And so I knew that there would be differences. I come from a background where I don't know what it's like to see your best friend get shot in front of you, or a parent, being strung out on drugs, or a parent being in the house, but not mentally present. And so right then and there, I knew that it was going to be, they had things to learn from me and I had things to learn from them. And so in the years that I started working with the young men at Morgan Park High School, I had an array. If you know Morgan Park is in the Beverly area. It's not necessarily, it's far south, but it's not like a school that is in Inglewood, that kind of thing like that. And so Mae Jemison, the first African-American astronaut to go to the moon, she went to Morgan Park High School. So there is some history there when it comes to status of alumni, that kind of thing. And so my BAM circles, and what BAM circles are, is what we do our work in. We sit them in a circle, and then it's about including the counselor, about 10 to 11 people in that circle. And we go through our core values. And our core values, we have a curriculum that we are taught as counselors by our, we call it BTA BAM Training Academy coaches. And everything that we teach the young men, it is taught to us. And so we're actually doing our own life's work at the same time. And so our core values of respect for womanhood, integrity, self-determination, visionary goal setting, and some others, we sat down and we were able to go through different scenarios through role playing and storytelling. And it takes a lot for young men to come in and kind of be vulnerable. So it took time, but we were able to. The biggest thing for me with the program was that a lot of the young men didn't know that they had options. And what I mean by options, that they had the ability to make a different decision. And them making different decisions gave them autonomy to do something different or better for themselves. One word that we use a lot is processing. And if a student is having a bad day and they come to the BAM room, and these are young men that has been in the program for at least 2 years, they'll come like, yo, Mr. Wilson, I need to process this situation, because they know that they are in a place physically and mentally, and they want to get out of that. And so what we do, we sit down and we talk about it. And we also turn the mirror towards them. What role did you play in this outcome? Because, you'll get, and I think we've all had moments when you've heard a child, or maybe even you when you were in school, saying, that teacher doesn't like me at all, and that's why I have this grade. Well, you didn't study. You didn't come to class on time. So it takes two people to get to a point. So we show them that, yes, sometimes the other person is wrong, but also sometimes we can be the catalyst of their responses. And so it creates this moment of, of reflecting that I play a role in everything that happens to me, so to speak. Another thing, as they become older, within the program, we have our college tour. Our college tour was started about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I am now the director over the college tour. We're actually having our first virtual college tour this Wednesday. But we take close to 200 young men, put them on a bus, and we go around the country visiting other colleges. And this is the time where a lot of young men, we have young men in Chicago that has never been downtown, let alone out of the state of Illinois. And so when that moment comes and they see that there are other individuals who look like me achieving something after high school, because honestly, they don't think that they're going to live past 19 or 20 years old. But when they see other people who are achieving things, that makes them want to achieve. And so we have students that have one particular young man that I worked with all 4 years. His name is Benjamin Todd. He is now at Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana. And he is on a full ride track scholarship and is captain of the team all his freshman year. So he is doing extremely well. And we have students that have gotten accepted to colleges on the spot. They didn't think that that was something that was available to them. We just thought that this is the time that we should expose them to something greater. And, I would often tell them, I said, I might not have the same experience as you, but there are some similar obstacles just because of me being a Black man that are faced, that we face together. And I have to overcome those obstacles so that you can overcome those obstacles. And I just want to, before I head it over to Michelle, I want to say that, a lot of times we hear about, Inglewood, Auburn, Gresham, and, the shooting and everything. One thing about my BAM circles is that we had students who came from those communities, but we also have students who came from two-parent households. And what made our group so original was the fact that they were able to see a lot of the times other men that looked like them have different points of views. And so they were able, the Bible talks about iron sharpens iron. And so those were those moments where they were able to sharpen each other's irons, because, one kid has to go home and take care of his brothers and sisters, well, while the other kid can go home and go to football practice or piano lessons. And they get to experience, my mom and dad be tripping too. And I come from a 2-parent household, and so they get to connect over stuff that normal teenagers would connect over. And so that is what BAM is. It's a transformative mentoring counseling program that has honestly, when experience, made young men have agency over their emotions and their thinking processes. Thank you.
Awesome, DK. Well, thank you. So I'm Michelle, and as he said, I am the Alumni Engagement Manager for Youth Guidance. And it's not just for BAM and WOW, it's actually for all of our programs that Youth Guidance has. So I will talk just a little bit about that after I talk about WOW. But I was a WOW counselor for 3 years, and before I became the Alumni Manager. So a lot of what DK said is the same for WOW, but I will go a little bit deeper into different things. For myself, I actually grew up on the south side of Chicago. So for me, when I enter the school, they see me always dressed properly, super clean. I always look really neat. And then they find out that I grew up 3 blocks away from them. And they're like, wow, okay, I guess that's possible. And for, just like DK is saying, they walk into a room and they get to see somebody that looks like them. For my girls, it was like somebody who grew up 3 blocks from where I currently live. And, and I tell them my mother still lives there. My family's still there. And then they see me and the way I speak and my eloquence and the way I expect them to be as well. And it just makes them want to be even better than they already are. So as we've talked a lot about, DK has talked a lot about BAM, and we do mirror each other. We are a brother and sister program. One of the things that we start with in WOW is called self-awareness. That is our very first value. And as I was helping these girls learn WOW, self-awareness was the basis. It's the very first value. And it wasn't just self-awareness of one thing. It was everything about you, whether it was your culture, your gender identity, how you get angry, like who you are as a woman, who you want to be as a woman, everything about it. And it was one of the first times that our girls were able to actually give their own self-awareness. Nobody was telling them who they were. We would sit in a circle. I would give examples, and then I would ask them who they are, to describe themselves, to identify themselves. And that basis really makes WOW come to life, because they get to say, I am a woman who likes to do this and that, and I feel this way about that. Whereas that might have been the first time that they got to do that, to really express who they were as a person. And then right after we find out who we are, then we're talking about our emotions. Then we're talking about emotional intelligence and how do we actually use that on a daily basis. One thing that's super important that DK did not get into, but it's important for both BAM and WOW, is the safe space. When we walk into our schools, we are a safe space. The room, the BAM or the WOW room, is a safe space. So a student can come in and have a horrible morning, then they come spend lunch with us, and they have a pretty good afternoon. Just being able to talk to us. We do this thing in WOW and BAM called brief encounters, where we're walking around the school, we're just checking on them. We're like, how are you today? How was math class? And they get to just kind of, just go and tell us everything. And that right there, it's so powerful, because we might have been the first person that actually asked them how they were feeling, as opposed to said, why do you look angry? Right? A teacher might come up to them and be like, why do you look so upset? Why are you doing this? But in reality, they have so much going on. As DK was describing, there's even more, right? All of our students, all of the world, we never know what happened that morning, that night. We never know what's going on. And systemically in school, sometimes teachers only see a student who might be upset, and that's all they see. They're not seeing something else, something in the background. So we are their safe space. And one of the things that I always tried to do in WOW was not only be a safe space for them, but help them create one in their house. So I would sit down individually with a lot of them with someone that I knew needed that kind of help. And we would come up with a safe space in their house, even if that was a 5-minute shower. It was the one place where they could be alone and they could breathe and they could deal with their life and just relax. You know, maybe it was their room if they had their own room, maybe it was outside, but finding that safe space within themselves that we were creating in the school, that's the vital part of BAM and WOW. That's what makes us work, because when they enter that room, they're honest, not only with us, but with themselves. I would ask my girls all the time, like 3 questions. Do you want to do it? Are you going to do it? You know, and can you do it? Because those could all be no or yes. Can you? You might not have the ability. Do you want to? And are you going to? All different. And it's very important to get all of that answered when you're trying to help a student or anybody make a change. Because that ability, you know, that's the systemic work we're talking about. We might go out there and be like, I don't understand why you can't just go home and relax. But in reality, a student might have 4 people living there and 3 bedrooms. So how could they go home and just relax? You know, that's the can. And then the other part is maybe they do have the ability, but maybe they're not ready. And that's the, are you going to, right? Are you actually going to do it? And then there's the want, because we might not actually be ready to do it. You might not actually want to make that change, you know, and that's what we get down to. That's the basis of that self-awareness. Who are you? Your emotional intelligence. Our final value is visionary goal setting, right? Because once we figured out who we are, then we can set goals. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things we wanted to really talk about, DK and I. The other thing about being in the schools that we really are proud of is that we're not just there to be there for WOW and BAM, we're there for the school, right? We become a part of the school. If there's a problem, we're called. You know, they're like, where's the BAM and the WOW counselor? They want us in the dean's office. They want us when there's an emergency, because they know that when we're walking the halls, people know who we are and they trust us and they respect us, even if they're not BAM or WOW, because their friends trust and respect us, so they trust and respect us. And that's a big part of why we work, because we don't just sit in our office hiding. We're out there and we're really becoming a part of the school to make everybody have a good day and a good time. So that's, you know, that's WOW and BAM in a nutshell. We are open to questions, but just a little bit about Alumni. It is only 1.5 years old. We have an established network and it's amazing, honestly. What we've established in that 1.5 years has been great. We have a mentoring program where our associate board and our executive board and some of our volunteers mentor the alumni one-on-one. We also have a counseling program where our alumni get free individual and group counseling. We have social events, which is them just coming to have fun with each other. But what are they doing in that time? You know, they're just learning about different people, just like they learned about us in school. They're learning about different people from the city and different values, right? So at first you were all in a school, BAM and WOW, and you were in the same school with the same teachers and the same issues. But now you're out there and now you're all in Chicago and now you're all working or you're doing something and you're just kind of getting together. And then I also do a lot of networking events. In youth guidance, the alumni network is doing a lot of networking events where, again, we bring the alumni together to not only network with each other, but to network with everybody else. So like we're bringing lawyers or we're bringing people that they're interested in talking to, and then we really help to make internships as well. Internships have been really great. Paid internships especially, but those have been great for our alumni because they get to learn hands-on while going to school and while figuring out what they want to do with their life. So that's about it for alumni. It's been really great. And if you guys have any questions for Dacaris and I, we're here.
You know, I'm going to hold off on the questions for just a second. I'm going to have Dick Patterson. So, one of the things that we're, by bringing youth guidance in today, that we're really trying to do is to give an example of how members of the church have seen, we can't change history. History is what it is, but it has caused a situation today. And there are members of the church, Dick and I and John Raid and Susan Bonrant are examples of one group that are involved in this program. Others are involved in other programs, but the focus is on trying to change the direction from this point forward. How do we try and provide a better path for the children who are living in these communities that are an outcome of some of that history? So I guess what I'd like to do is have Dick, maybe, Dick's been involved in the organization for a very long time. I'll let him maybe describe what keeps him motivated. And I'll talk a little bit about it myself, and then we'll open it up for questions. So Dick.
Good. Thank you, Scott. My involvement basically started really going back to college, where I made a commitment to myself that I was going to give something back to the society I live in here. And that led me to, I've served on numerous boards. I've been on 7 not-for-profit boards over the last 3 decades. My favorite organization, of course, is Youth Guidance. My involvement in Youth Guidance started in my 20s with a group of people. We started tutoring at Cabrini Green. For people who have been around here for a long time, Cabrini Green was somewhat like the symbol of the destitute of inner cities. It's all been raised down now. But we started by tutoring kids from Cabrini Green through the auspices of the Episcopal Charities. As a consequence of that, we did that for a few years. Then we started a group called the Metropolitan Board of Youth Guidance, which was basically people in their late 20s, 30s, sort of a subgroup to the regular Youth Guidance Board. Eventually, I got on the Youth Guidance Board, and I've been there for many decades now. And it's been a very worthwhile experience. You know, it's been particularly rewarding to see what's happened with the Youth Guidance organization. When I started, it was basically a handful of social workers in a couple schools. Now it's 9,000 kids. We've got all these national locations that we're involved with. We're a multi-million-dollar organization. I might add that the church has been very generous over the years in the outreach program to give to youth guidance also, which I've been involved with. But it's been a tremendous experience, and I hope to keep on going. Any questions?
We'll hold off on the questions. Let me kind of provide maybe a quick background on my involvement, and then we can kind of open it up for questions about the program and points in general. So I've been on the board for about 30 years. And I first got involved because I think, like so many people on this call, right, education is what got us to where we are, right? The fact that we had good education enabled us to achieve what we've achieved in our lives. And, the thing I think many of us realize is that not everybody, especially those in under-resourced communities, really have the opportunity for the education that we had. And education is really twofold, right? It's the reading, writing, and arithmetic that you learn in the classroom, but it's also kind of the social and emotional learning that is so critical to the success that anybody has. And I'll give you one example that comes out of the Becoming a Man program, the BAM program. One of the things they do early on in the program with the boys is they have them pair off. And then once they're in pairs, they give one of the boys a ball. And they say, okay, hold on to this ball. And they say to the other boy, you have 2 minutes. You can do anything you want to get that boy to give you the ball. And so for 2 minutes, it is absolute bedlam in the classroom as these boys, try and pummel the ball out of the other one. And usually it's less than 2 minutes where the BAM counselor has to call timeout. Say, okay, everybody stop. And the boys calm down, and the counselor says, okay, who asked their partner to give them the ball? Why did you all start jumping on each other and wrestling and trying to pull the ball from the other person's hand? And the kids will say something like, I didn't want to appear weak. I didn't want him to think that, I wasn't stronger than him. I had to, he wouldn't have given it to me. And what you learn, right, over time, and what these students learn throughout the school year then as they go through the BAM program, is that they have to learn to both manage their emotions and express themselves, and to kind of not be, you can be strong without having to be physically aggressive. And in these neighborhoods that they live, this spur of the moment, these quick decisions that they make, in that 30 seconds or 1 minute can change their life, right? For the better or for the worse. And having the ability to kind of have the social and emotional education is something that many of them haven't had the opportunity to develop. And I think that, what has kept me involved in youth guidance is the fact that we are giving them the tools, the social and emotional tools that enable them to stay in school so that they can get the reading, writing, and arithmetic. I mean, I think one of the most rewarding situations I had is I also serve on the board of Lawrence University. And I was up there for a board meeting, and I'm walking around campus, and there is a student walking around with a Becoming a Man shirt. And he had grown up on the south side of Chicago. No one in his family had ever been to college. He had never thought he could go to college. And it was really through being in the program that, he not only stayed in high school, but excelled enough so that, he could get accepted to a 4-year college. And, because of what he is doing, he's going to be successful, right? He's going to be able to take the next generation of his family and move it forward. And that's, I think when we came up with the title for tonight, Spirit of Repair, I mean, that's, I think what we're trying to talk about is how we all can engage in programs, be it youth guidance, be it other programs, but we all can provide a service to enable youth in these communities to move forward, to be the first one in their families to graduate from high school, to go on to community college or to 4-year college, and to begin to break the cycle that has been imposed on them for so many generations because of the situations that have happened over the last 150, 200 years. So that's a little bit about youth guidance and Dick and my involvement with it, and John and Susan would echo, I think, a lot of what we said. But let me just kind of open it up for people in terms of questions that you might have around the program, the community, some of the experiences that Michelle or Dacaris have had.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do schools go about getting BAM and WOW into their curriculums? Are they approached by BAM and WOW? Or is it vice versa? I mean, because these programs sound so fabulous, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice if all needy schools had these programs?
Yeah. DK, you want to take that one?
It's, what's your name? Maria? Maria, nice to meet you.
You too.
I am there with you. I think all schools, honestly, with what teenagers and young people are living through today, they need a program like this. But a lot of times it has been, well, one for Chicago, when Mayor Rahm Emanuel was in office, he was a big supporter of our programs, and he kind of mandated, like, these schools need our program. And so it is through mandate, so to speak, but a lot of the time principals seek the program out. And then different cities, I got to have at Morgan Park. We're now in Dallas, and the deputy mayor of Dallas and his team came to Morgan Park, and we were able to host them and kind of see, they got to kind of see what we did at Morgan Park. So it's a lot of ways that people can, obtain the program.
Okay.
Not all principals, I might add, are receptive. Over the years, some of the principals don't want youth guidance for various reasons.
But I think that, Maria, it has been, for a while, we were trying to push the program in. Now, I think because of the results we've seen, we have more schools asking for it than we can afford to support. I mean, our estimate is that we could provide this program to some 20,000 students in Chicago. That's how many students need this program. but it's really a lot now of having the financial resources to make it happen, as well as then just, getting the program up and running.
And are you funded primarily through private donations?
It's about 50-50. So we get some federal grants, but we also have a lot of foundations, corporate foundations, and individuals that provide the funding. Yeah.
Scott, I have a question. Maybe this is for Michelle. The kids that do end up going away to school, to college, what happened? Is your alumni program staying in touch with these kids, like when they go off for their freshman year, and touch base with them when they're away from home for the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So honestly. So what I do as being the alumni manager is I actually reach out to graduating seniors through senior surveys to get their information. And then me and some other people, we're reaching out to them to find out where they are, what they're doing. Some of them get scholarships through youth guidance, and then they check in with me with grades and stuff like that. But as far as what you're saying, just checking in, I also was able to do a mentoring program. So the mentoring program is also up and running. So some of the alumni at college have a virtual mentor as well. So, it's a mixture because, just like we as adults were in programs, when we were younger, not everyone always wants to stay as an alumni, right? So the youth, the alumni that are interested, everything we have, they're open to. So if they want a mentor, we're going to find them one, even if it's virtual. And again, if they need some type of support, some type of emergency assistance, we're going to help them if we can, no matter where they are. We actually had a WOW student at the beginning of this school year, who couldn't buy anything for her dorm. And she reached out, and I reached out to WOW, and they actually helped her buy some things for her dorm because she was going off and she was going to have an empty dorm room. And we were like, we're not going to do that. Right. So, it's really, if you reach out and we do. And that's about it.
Ann Mueller asked the question around whether we're engaged with the Noble network of schools and the Noble Charter network.
No, we're not at this point. I was looking at our roster. I haven't seen any, and I've not heard of any either that we're affiliated with the Noble.
Yeah, we are in some of the charter schools, but not all of them.
Those, right?
Yeah.
So I have another question. Beyond that, do you connect with churches and other nonprofit organizations to try and bring your programming into those?
Yeah, so Episcopal Charities has been a long time supporter of youth guidance.
I'm sorry, which one, Scott?
Episcopal Charities. Episcopal Charities. I only know them because they've made sizable contributions over the years. I haven't seen our full list. I don't know whether there are other churches or not.
Well, I even mean like local neighborhood churches to gather your troops.
Well, I know that Christ Church also supports us.
No, I mean the neighborhood churches.
The neighborhood. Oh, I see. In the neighborhoods,
where youth guidance is being served. Yeah.
I gotcha.
DK
Davius or Michelle, do you know of any of the churches in Englewood or Austin or Morgan Park that with which we are involved?
That I know of.
Yeah, I don't know any of them, to be quite honest.
Yeah, nothing official, but as all people, our BAM and WOW counselors are very diverse, and some belong to programs. And, I do know a WOW counselor who's on the northwest side. She's very involved in her church, and whenever they have something to help the youth, she offers it to her students, whether it's like a giveaway or something like that. And I know I was at Foreman on the northwest side as well. And we have this one thing, a part of our curriculum, which is actually going out and doing engagement with the community and doing an act of good, an act of service. So I actually took my students to food pantries to do that as well. So that is something when we do get out into the community for our act of service, a part of our curriculum, but nothing official.
I would like to point out, Ms. Ann, is that during the I think right before the pandemic, we had the strike with CPS. A lot of the neighborhood churches opened up their doors for us as counselors to come in, and we were able to set up snacks and food. I know right across the street from Morgan House, we call it the Blue House. It is connected to, I believe, the Catholic Church. And so they allowed us to come in. I would order food for the counselors and the kids would literally come and just sit, play games, do homework if they had it, or whatever that they needed to do. So in times of needs, churches have, done what they needed to do to accommodate us and our students.
I think one of the things that it's quite oftentimes difficult for people who live up here to understand the complexity of the lives of students down there is one of the big problems that youth guidance has with the BAM and WOW programs and CPS has is students are very transient, right? They, because the living situation is oftentimes financially unstable or emotionally unstable or not safe, these students are moving around. And quite honestly, oftentimes are just lost in the system. We try and keep track of them from school to school. But you'll have a student who will be there for half the year, and all of a sudden they're kicked out of their apartment. Their mom has to move for a job. And they're lost, right? They're lost within CPS. They're oftentimes lost within the BAM program or the WOW program. So it's an unstable environment. And one of the things we try and do is provide stability for them, because as Michelle was saying, just that stability and that safe space is something that is oftentimes incredibly unique to these students.
Scott, there are some questions in the comments.
Yeah, I'm looking at some others. So Marie had a question: Is BAM and WOW just in schools? Are they in community centers and other locations, or is it just a school-based program?
So I know for BAM, we are in schools, but we also had a stint where we were working with inmates in the system. Yeah. And it was honestly I was always interested, but I was always so busy at Morgan Park because one of the guys who was the counselor there, he was a part of my cohort where we did, where we were the students of the BAM program. But he would always have stories, and it was just so amazing to hear, like, some of these guys were able to get out of jail. Some of them had a little longer to go, and some of them weren't coming out at all, but they were able to change themselves within that system. And so we're not, so to speak, in community centers, but we have done work in outreach in that way. For WOW, Michelle.
But I think 90% of what youth guidance does is based in the schools. We are one of the few organizations that is based solely in the schools, which is why Michelle said that we're oftentimes pulled into issues that the principals are dealing with students. There's another question here in terms of just, let me take this question, Christine, and I'll come back to you. Question in terms of, for the past year, it's been a very tough situation in terms of race relations and dealing with racial issues, in Chicago and nationwide. So, how has that affected the engagement with BAM and WOW students? And I guess even on top of that with COVID, how's that work?
Well, I would say when the world was open before the pandemic, we had a lot of outside, noises going on. You had this, you had to go to this and do this. But when the pandemic happened, it shut down an outside noise, and the internal noise became louder with what our young people were experiencing at home, because they were at home all the time. I told myself 2 weeks tops, they're going to be looking at the wall like, I have to get out of this house, because now they're getting to know their parents, and they might not like their parents, and their parents are getting to know them, and the parents might not like to know them. But it's just one of those things. And so on top of that, we had not only a pandemic, but a racial pandemic going on within our country. With George Floyd was, a huge catalyst into what would, went down. And you had Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And one of the things that we focused on is, honestly, since we couldn't be there with our young people, is that we made spaces virtually for them to express themselves. Because one thing I will say about the young people that we work with is that, they're not lost in the sauce. They're not, they see, and they have their own opinions, and they are questioning these things that they see, and they just don't have an outlet to express that. And so we made a virtual space as a safe space as it could be. And I know for myself and other counselors that I know, we will honestly just sit there. We're not doing anything in the BAM curriculum. We're going to talk about the video that was released with Ahmaud Arbery. Or we're going to talk about, the 9-minute George Floyd video. And how does that affect you? And how are you going to let it dictate when you walk outside? One student said something that was so profound. He said, I don't realize that I'm reminded that I'm Black when I go outside. And I was just like, man, that's really, you're 16 years old and you're experiencing these types of feelings. Because, they talk about some of them who go downtown on Michigan Avenue, how if they're with a group of friends, how they get looks. Because, there's that mob mentality of what has been seen within social media and media, that when they see a group of young Black kids, they automatically think of a stereotype, and they just want to be out and about in their city. And so we've dealt with it in a way of just being open and listening, because I always say you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
That's great, TK.
There's another question. I know we have 2 minutes left. Do you want me to answer this one?
Yeah. Christine, you had a question, and then
I did, and it's actually about alumni engagement.
Okay.
Outside of going on the board of an organization like Youth Guidance, or giving money, which everyone always appreciates because you need it, but beyond that, particularly for people that have gotten beyond the high school age but are BAM graduates and WOW graduates, what are the things that can be most impactful that people that live and work in affluent communities, lots of people in various professions, could do that would help these alumni continue in their path to personal growth and, frankly, economic opportunity down the road?
Honestly, networking is really big, because they get to meet people in these places, and that are going to maybe down the line help them. Having those conversations with people, like for instance, we have a student who's in community college, but he knows he wants to be a lawyer. So we have him working with a mentor who is already a very awesome lawyer, and he's doing very well for himself. So he gets to start at the beginning. He hasn't even graduated and gone to law school, but he already has a law mentor. That's the type of thing that's very helpful. Someone who's going to sit down with them and help them plan out, what they're doing, how they can succeed. That's a very big thing. So networking, mentoring, and then things like that. Yeah. I'm sorry, Scott.
We have practice interviews for students who are.
Yeah, practice interviews as well.
Who want to go out into the world. I mean, that's it. It's an interesting thing when we think about our own children. Think about how much time you spend with them talking about jobs, careers, preparation. How do you do a job interview? Many of these students don't have that.
Yes, exactly.
And I will, if I can just take a second and describe one of my own personal experiences. For a while, when I met a student in the BAM program, it really bothered me that they never looked me in the eye when I shook their hands. And it bothered me until I was talking to one of the students and he said, you know, when you are living in the communities we live in, if you look somebody in the eye, it can be a challenge. And you don't, especially somebody who maybe has a little bit more power than you, if you look them in the eye, that can be viewed as somewhat of a challenge. So these students are having to almost learn how to move from one culture to another culture. And something as simple as how do you shake hands and look somebody in the eye and have a conversation with them is something that is new. And so the mentors can help with that.
Communication is very key, especially sometimes when, you know, the mentor might be white and the mentee might be African American. And so there is a level of, you know, one as the mentor of comfort of who you are and, you know, expressing, because it's going to take time. Because, you know, they're going to test you. All teenagers test people. And so them testing you, they want to know, honestly, if you are going to see me and welcome me into your space. Because if not, I can just stay in the situation that I'm in. But of course, them being, you know, teenagers, a lot of them might not have the language or know the language of how of, you know, expressing that, but just showing up as your authentic self and, you know, knowing that, you know, I have questions, you might have questions, but we want to build this relationship with each other. So communication is key, because I think sometimes with situations like that, a lot of times young people don't feel as if they, you know, are looked at as humans. Everybody wants to be respected as a human. And so, you know, this is just not something like, you know, I do this to put on my resume. It has to come from a genuine place for it to work out as a genuine situation.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on, unless there's any more questions. You know, we said that we take this an hour, and this has been a long day, I know, for Michelle and DK. So, you know, I think that I'll just leave it on this one note. I mean, I think what we hope to share tonight was just one example of how we all can play a role in repairing our society and repairing some of the challenges that have been put upon us as a complete society, and certainly individuals in these under-resourced communities. And whether it's youth guidance or whether it's many other programs, you know, we all can play a role in helping to repair some of the challenges that are out there. So thank you all for taking the time tonight. Thank you very much to DK and Michelle for joining us and sharing information about BAM and WOW and youth guidance. So
thank you all for the space. Continue to do the work, y'all. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It was really great getting to know everybody. I wish we could be in person and get to know you better. And I did answer your question in the chat. I hope that was good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.